Happy Monday. Good to see you guys. Let's get my camera to work. Cool. And let's start seated. Something supportive of the spine. Something where you can maybe slow things down a little bit. So just some nice, deep, easy, fluid breaths. So you can bring yourself into an awareness that is contained by the borders of your mat. And give ourselves about 60 more seconds here. Just slowing down, consciously slowing the respiratory rate down. Maybe one final inhale that really inflates the lung cavity. And a full exhale where you feel the emptying of the lungs. Before we'll let the eyes softly blink open if they're closed and transition to hands and knees tabletop. So establishing that tabletop base where your wrist, elbow, and shoulders are stacked, where the knees are directly below the hips, and offer a little sway here through the tailbone. And then eventually tailbone comes to neutral, and we'll pull the spine to neutral as well, so we don't have any of that belly extension. Curl the toes, and we'll roll back to experience down dog, and then give yourself a little opportunity to sway once again. So a little play with the tailbone movement and how that changes and impacts both the stability of the shape, so the hand connection here especially, and then the lateral line as well. And then let's come down to hands and knees, and we'll sink and settle back into child's pose. And this is more or less an opportunity to explore child's pose, just to see how our body is responding to this anterior support tonight. Obviously, we also have that anterior compression at the hip capsule, potential for some restriction on the lateral edge. Let's give ourselves 15 more seconds here just to feel gravity pressing on the spine, see what we can do to get more neutral and elongated in the spinal column. And as you're ready, fingertips grip into the mat. Let's use that fingertip engagement to pull ourselves back to tabletop, and then curl our toes, lift our seat and find our way into down dog once again. From our down dog, get the depth of the shape first, and then let's walk forward to the front of the mat. We'll meet in a fold. From your fold space, take a nice big half lift, get that big flat back extension. Think about the length you have the opportunity to create. And then exhale and melt back into your fold with the opportunity to experience that sensation of the release. Drift your awareness towards your sacrum. And as the awareness gets into that sacrum space, let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. So that eventually we make our way into this nice, powerful, stable mountain pose. Little flex in the glutes, little flex in the quads. Bring the hands together at heart center. Splay those fingers out wide. Shoot, I moved the wrong direction. Fingers out wide so we get as much space in between each finger crease as is possible. And keep that as you sink towards chair. Just a little touch of the chair shape. Feel the quads engage. Keep that handprint energy nice and expanded. And then we'll lift back up, sweep the arms, and exhale yourself through fold. Inhale to half lift. And exhale to full. Slide your left foot straight back into lunge. Push back through that left quad. Feel that engagement of the thigh, and then sweep up. We'll visit crescent. Little moment for some anterior posterior neutrality. Feel the strength as we are rooted in the shape. And then delicately float the hands back down to the mat. We will return the left foot to the front of the mat. Inhale to half lift. And then exhale to fold. As you settle back into your fold, slide the right foot straight back into lunge. Flex that quad, flex that calf, and then sweep up. Just experiencing this nice flat front body, flat back body. And then delicately float your hands back down to the mat, and we will step back to that front space. Inhale to half lift. As you half lift, slide your hands up your legs. They can be below the knees or above the knees, but they can't be on the knees. So hands are on the legs so that you can pressurize a little bit and get a little bit more extension through the spine. And then with that nice, big, flat, neutral extension, release yourself back and into fold. As you settle into that fold space, think about how you can relax into the length you just created with action, and then plant your hands and we'll walk to plank. From plank, glutes, core squeeze. We keep that same level of engagement in the mid body, and we'll slowly lower ourselves down to our belly. Let's flip the tops of the feet and slide our elbows forward for Sphinx. Palms down, fingertips engaged into the mat. As the fingertips engage, feel this upper abdominal band really get actively pulled. It's the fingerprints, so splaying those fingers out nice and wide and then actively pressing them down, that really allows that access. At the same time, our head positioning will determine two things, both the compression component at the low back and the ability to get a little bit deeper into the core. So our primary focus is compression. If we're feeling compression in the low back, we don't want that. We'll lower our head until we don't. If we're feeling like the handprint energy is fine, the low back is fine, we can continue to lift the chin and even retract the throat and chin until you really feel this whole abdominal space just getting that vertical expansion that really is difficult to create outside of Sphinx. Let's hold this for 15 more seconds here. Remember that fingerprint energy helps dictate and determine how much access we can get to the abdominals. Last 5 seconds here. And we'll relax. And let's bring the forehead down on stacked hands for a little crocodile pose. And as you settle into this crocodile pose, we were in Sphinx for quite a long time. So the mid body, that trunk space up to the bottom of the rib cage, may be extra sensational. See if you can utilize your exhale breath to relax that musculature that was pulled so that we can get some good recovery in that area. And we'll be here for about 30 more seconds. So there is an undisputable, undoubted king of the jungle. Of course, it is the lion. But we never really get the full story of how the lion became the king of the jungle. When you're right, when you're ready, let's slide the hands back underneath the shoulders. We'll press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, let's curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into down dog. And from down dog, let's step our, let's see, what'll be the easiest to show? Left foot forward. Left foot comes forward. And then right knee grounds. Top of the right foot can flip. It doesn't have to flip. The left hand is going to come on top of the left thigh here. And the right hand is going to be firmly planted underneath that right shoulder. So that is providing all the stability we need from the shape. Then press down into your left hand until you feel the activation right at that handprint thigh energy and start to roll that left shoulder up, but not from left shoulder retraction, from energy down into the left hand. We're looking to twist so deeply that we start to feel some lateral edge expansion, lateral line expansion on the right side. So as we get that pressure, maybe even lift the chin, can the handprint energy drive the length into the twist? And then we'll return back to neutral. Plant the left hand, step the left foot back to tabletop. Curl your toes, lift your seat, and find your way back into down dog. So a little bit of asymmetry here, not symmetry, asymmetry here. As you press back, think about how you can balance at the sacrum. And don't necessarily worry about this trunk space asymmetry or imbalance. Just think about flat neutral sacrum. And then we'll step our right foot forward and take this to side 2. The left knee comes down, left hand plants. That is the support of the shape. Right hand comes on the thigh. Push down into that right hand and drive the right shoulder up with the hand pressure. It is really about the pressure of the hand forcing the shoulder into the rotation. That loads the anterior of the right side and allows it to capture this fascial expansion down that left side lateral chain. When you feel like you've had enough, we can release back to neutral, slide the right foot back to tabletop, curl the toes, and lift the seat into down dog. And as you get back into that down dog, think about pressurizing into the handprints across the finger mounds so that the tailbone lift can be as high as is possible. And then let's walk ourselves forward into forward fold. Inhale into half lift. And exhale back into fold. Awareness to the sacrum, let's sweep or roll all the way up. And we'll come back to mountain. Hands come together, heart center. And eyes can close here if it feels comfortable for you. So if we have the trust within our mountain to let the eyes close, let them. If it doesn't feel right for you, doesn't feel natural for you, keep the eyes open. Either way, we are going to think about neutrality across the hips and then draw your left shoulder back into a twist. And we're really trying to accentuate the capacity for rotation here. So it's about lumbar rotation. We're really trying to take the spine and just add as much torsion as we possibly can. And then we'll come back to neutral. Settle. Now, note with the eyes closed, the eyes not closed, doesn't matter, right? Just note how much bias there is in your body wanting to go left. And just try to find a relaxed neutrality. And then let's do the same thing to the right. Right shoulder draws back. We keep that right shoulder drawing back. Hands stay just about heart center. They may come offline just slightly as that shoulder pulls, but really think about anchoring the hands middle of the body. And then let's come back to neutral. Sweep the arms and turn the palms towards the front of the room. And then we'll half fold. So the palms end up facing straight down. As we get to this position, there's a desire for our hips to rock back. Try to keep the hips right over that midline and then release yourself all the way into that fold space. And really think about how the middle of your spine is responding. So middle of the spine being kind of bottom of the rib cage, and then maybe 4 inches down towards the sacrum and 4 inches up towards the cervical spine. And then plant your hands and we're gonna walk back into down dog. And as we get our body back into that down dog space, really think about the pressure in the fingerprints and the extension of the tailbone, reaching and extending, trying to neutralize that spinal angle. And let's step our right foot forward into lunge. And as the right foot comes forward, let's ground our left heel. And then keep your torso pointed straight down. Come up onto your fingertips. As you come up onto your fingertips, note how much low back musculature is forced to be activated. We're trying to keep a little space between the thigh and the sternum. And then release the hands back down and roll open to warrior two. That's a pretty funky spot for your right hip. Think about settling all the way into the space. Try to keep that front shin vertical. And then left hand comes back down to the mat. And now we have some fatigue on this right side. Lay the toes out. And let's sweep up to warrior one. So torso faces towards the front of the room. I decide if you're going to do that, but use the strength in your quad here. Hamstring's pretty beat up. Spin the back heel up, release the hands down to the mat, and we'll step the right foot back into down dog. Nice big asymmetry here. Come down to hands and knees. Flip the tops of the feet and sink back into child's pose. And settle. Melt into child's pose. Think about how you can utilize the space we've created in the trunk. So rib cage down to pelvic bone, and how we can really find more capacity to release into our child's pose here. And we'll give ourselves about 15 more seconds in child's pose. And then as you're ready, I gave you a few there. Let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees, tabletop. And from tabletop, curl our toes, lift our seat, find our way back into down dog. And from down dog, step our left foot forward into lunge. Left foot lands, right heel grounds. We come up onto the fingertips. I might have said tiptoes the first time through, but I meant fingertips. And really get that little space in between the torso and the thighs here. Really trying to activate the low back and keep the back neutral. Same time that hip likely wants to sway out, hug the left hip back in. And then release yourself down and sweep the right hand up into warrior two. This is a huge ask because we did load that hip there, and now we're using the hip to create space. So this can be a tricky little transition. And then we will bring the hands back down to the mat. Keep that right pinky toe edge of your foot grounded. Hug back through the left hip crease and sweep yourself up into warrior one. The ilium's pointed straight forward. Good, strong front body neutrality, back body neutrality. Right heel spins up, crescent. Float the hands down to the mat. Step to down dog. Bend the knees and just touch bear. So tabletop with the knees floating, and then lift back to down dog. And let's walk ourselves forward to fold. And from fold, inhale to half lift. And exhale back into your fold space. Settle all the way into your fold space. Really release into that. Drift your awareness to your sacrum. And that's roll or sweep up. We'll come all the way to mountain. Hands come together, heart center once again. And this time we're going to heel toe the feet as close together as we can get them. So we end up with a nice inner thigh squeeze, and then sink the seat back towards chair. Now the key here is, even though we have the legs close, we're not turning the knees in. So we're keeping the heels neutral as well. And then we are also making sure that the knees aren't going forward, but that the hips are going back. And then we'll rise, sweep the arms, and exhale through forward fold. Inhale to half lift. Exhale back to fold. Sweep yourself back up to mountain. Hands come together at heart center. And this time we'll take the feet out to the width of the mat. So we end up with some nice width between the thighs. And then same thing, we're going to sink to chair. The key, once again, is we're not bowing the knees out. We're just going straight back. So knees stay roughly neutral. And seat is back, knees aren't forward. And we want to feel the low back kind of settle into this shape. And note how different the hamstring response is with the legs wide. And then we'll lift ourselves up. Legs stay wide, sweep the arms. And exhale through forward fold. Inhale to half lift. Exhale to fold. And let your hands slide inside the legs here. So if you can grab the heels or the ankles, rad. If you're grabbing, actually, if you can't grab the heels or the ankles, take the hands to the outer edge, because it's really just too much to get up to the calf on the shoulder. So if you can't get the heels or the ankles, just go to the outside and give yourself that same pull. But we're looking to pull the torso back, like we're trying to align the torso underneath the sacrum here. And then relax, plant your hands. We'll walk back into down dog. And now really think about extending into down dog in the same length that you just created with that pull of the torso in between the thighs. Really thinking about creating that same amount of length and energy in the spine, now with a neutral angle. And then let's come down to hands and knees. And we'll sink back into child's pose. Slow, fluid, easy breath. And then from child's pose, slide your hands in front of you if they're not. And we're going to use the hands to pull our torso forward and end up on our belly. And we're headed back to Sphinx. Fingertips pressurize. Same pull, fingertips back to the elbow crease. We have a lot more space around the trunk now. So as you're here, adjusting the head, putting your head in the position where it most benefits the anterior expansion while least impacting the posterior compression. So we're making sure we're not getting lumbar compression, and we're looking to open up the front body as much as is possible. Backpacking on the openness we've created around this trunk already. So we've worked front, lateral, and posterior around this center body pretty, I won't say exclusively, but intently. Let's give ourselves 20 more seconds here. And then when you're ready, release your head down, stack your hands for a little crocodile pose, and try to get the trunk to relax. So we never talk about how the lion becomes the king of the jungle. It turns out it's a democratic process. And there's this old lion who's been the king of the jungle for many, many years. And his term is up. And he's decided to run for re-election. And he's running against this much younger, much more energetic, much stronger, much wilder lion. And the two of them have been campaigning for months, calling out the differences. And those differences have created factions within the jungle community. Some people feel like it's time for a change, and others feel like they want the stability of the incumbent. Last 15 seconds here. Just fluid, easy breath. When you're right, when you're ready, let's feel the fingerprints slide back underneath the shoulders, pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, curl your toes, lift your seat, reach and extend back into down dog. And this time in down dog, as you get back into the shape, can you think about the front hip crease pulling back, like you're trying to pull the hip crease through your glutes, and the belly button up through your tailbone. So belly button is pulling down towards the belt line. And use that to lengthen the connective tissue between the lumbar and the thoracic spine, the tissue right at the thoracic joint in the middle of your back. Really think about hips back and up, hands down, middle of the back. I know I'm showing this in the front, but middle of the back expanding. And then let's walk ourselves to the front of the mat. And we'll inhale to half lift. And exhale to fold. Sweep yourself all the way up. Exhale the hands to heart center. Bring that left knee up to a little half karate kid. And slide our left foot straight back and into lunge. Ground your left heel and bring your right forearm down on top of your right thigh. Now we want to make sure the tibia and fibia are stacked perfectly here. We don't want any angle because we want to rest the forearm on this thigh musculature, but let the bone do the work. Then the left hand is going to reach straight up, and then the left hand is going to turn palm down and reach straight forward. And what we're looking to expand here is the posterior right side and the lateral left side. So grounded back heel, there's a relative relaxation through the right arm, and that left arm is really energizing straight out. And the straightness of the extension is pretty important. We want a stacked shoulder structure, and that left hand just continually extending out. Now let's pull back to warrior two. And as we find our way back into that warrior two, just settle. Let the front quad, that right quad, really take some strength here. And then let your left heel spin up and we'll come into crescent. From crescent, hands are gonna drop to heart center and we'll use that momentum to step to the front of the mat. And we just settle, relax, feel a little bit of asymmetry. Note the shoulder asymmetry because it's kind of unique. The right shoulder, because it got this big posterior strap pull, is almost like dropping. And the left shoulder, because it was so active, is almost like lifting. So really try to bring the shoulder stability back. And then let's take that right knee up. Little half karate kid. We'll slide the right foot back. We land, ground the right heel. Left forearm comes on top of the left thigh. And we want this to be relatively relaxed. Right hand reaches up first, and then palm down, extend straight out. Shoulder stack. The gaze is roughly straight right. It can be up, but I don't think you need that. We're really thinking about the right hand extending forward as the distancer in this shape. And you want to feel that top side, now right side lateral chain expansion to know you've gotten into the full depth, and that'll give you that left side pull. And then we'll draw up to two. Smooth and settle here. Feel the strength of that left quad. Right heel spins up. We find our way to crescent. Good anterior, posterior neutrality. Hands come to heart center. We use that momentum to step back to the front of our mat. And we just breathe. Just a little relaxation. Now we want the shoulders to relax backward. Like they are, the humeral head is relaxing into the shoulder socket so that we're not hunching, we're not rounding forward. Good core squeeze. Shoulders just relax back. And actually, let's take a little moment to roll that because we have that shoulder mobility now. So pull your elbows up like you're trying to take your elbows just underneath the pec musculature and then squeeze the shoulders back and then drop your hands to heart center. And feel the amount of musculature between the shoulder blades that's active here, but also note how much neutrality we can have at that trunk space. Try to keep the shoulders locked in as you sweep the arms up and overhead. And we'll exhale through fold. Inhale to half lift. Exhale back to fold. Plant your hands, walk yourself back into down dog. Get all the way into that depth. Create that sensation of length. Think about the shoulder integrity staying with you this time. We have not been shoulder focused at all in our down dogs. I think that's true. So let's just have this awareness. Now, shoulders are locked in with all of the mid-body trunk space you've created, that lumbar space you've created. And then we'll relax, come down to hands and knees. Think back into child's pose. Settle all the way back into your child's pose here. And we're just going to be here for 40 seconds. So these two lion candidates are making their diverse case for why they should be the next king. And as the community fractures, it seems like there's going to be a very close race. But as election day comes forward, let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop and then extend our legs out in front of us so that we make it to staff. And it's just a transition staff straight to fold. As election day comes and the ballots are counted, it turns out that it wasn't very close at all. The incumbent wins with 70% of the vote. And this younger, newer, stronger, more wild challenger only gets about 30%. The old, wise incumbent making his way to his acceptance speech. Last 30 seconds here. When he comes across his opponent on the side of the road by himself, full-blown tears ripping down his face through his whiskers. And the two share a private, quiet moment away from the media. Let's bring ourselves up into seat and release ourselves onto our back. Good amount of work already done. We're not quite finished, but nice little opportunity to check in on that posterior chain expansion. So we were pretty focused on the torso. We did a few things that did some leg expansion, but pretty focused on torso expansion, really hyper focused on this trunk space, bottom of the rib cage to the top of the hip bones. Can you feel that neutralize against your mat here? And then when you're ready, let's bring our knees to a bent position if they're not already. And we will extend our right leg straight up towards the ceiling and interlace our hands behind the right hamstring. And pull the toes towards the nose. Remember, you can bend the knee. So if the hamstring doesn't have the capacity to be fully elongated, bend the knee and soften and pull the toes to get that same level of hamstring engagement. And then relax the right leg. Let it bend and mirror the left. And then the left leg will extend towards the ceiling. Fingers interlace behind the left hamstring. Pull those toes towards the nose here. And then when you feel balance left to right, the left leg will come down and mirror the right. Both knees are bent. And then we'll extend both legs down the mat. Left leg stays connected to the mat. Right leg comes up, and we'll interlace the hands behind the hamstring. Once again, remembering that the knee can bend. This time, instead of flexing the toes, we're going to flex the quad. So squeeze into the quad and think about how that quad squeeze impacts the hamstring capacity. And it's just a big quad flex here. And then release the right leg. Feel the variance between the left and right side before we move on to side two. And then when you're ready, left leg's gonna lift, hands interlace behind the left hamstring, and we get that good quad flex on side two. It's the quad flex that changes the hamstring activation. So instead of using the toes, we're using a bigger piece of musculature. And then when you feel balanced, left leg comes down and mirrors. The right. Let's inhale and bend both knees. And we'll let the knees start to sway side to side for a little dynamic movement. Instead of just moving the knees left to right, can you explore how the transverse musculature, the musculature radiating off the spinal column, is responding to the knee movement? So as the knees fall to the right, can you note how that thoracic joint supportive musculature on the left side is pulled? As the knees fall to the left, can you note how the right side is pulled? And just play with that as the knees dynamically move left to right. So this old wise lion gets up to give his acceptance speech, and he surprises the entire jungle. He pulls up his opponent from the crowd. And he puts him next to him at the podium. He puts his arm around him and he says, we've come to an agreement. And nobody knows what the next statement is going to be. And he says, I won 70% of the vote. He won 30% of the vote. I'm going to let him be the king of 30% of the jungle. Like training wheels. To eventually become king of 100%. And the jungle loves this idea. Everybody applauds the unity. Next time the knees fall over to the left, let's allow them to stay there. And so after the speech, the two kings go their own way. The younger, stronger physically, wilder king heads to his 30% of the jungle. And the incumbent does his own thing. He doesn't worry about much. And the younger lion wants to make an impression. So he starts imposing new rules and he starts responding to any problem that's brought to his attention. At any hour it's brought to his attention. And even with only 30% of the jungle underneath his watch, he finds out that there is always something going wrong. There is always something that needs to be responded to. And so he starts sleeping an awful lot less. Every time he finds a quiet moment, Someone wakes him up with a new need, with a new pull. We'll be here for another 35 seconds. And so each problem that is brought to his attention, he creates some type of new strategy for solving it. And each time he creates a new strategy, it somehow, some way seems to create a new problem. So he creates a new strategy, and it becomes this never-ending cycle of trying to address and fix and readdress and refix problems. When you're right, when you're ready, knees come back to neutral. And then we'll exhale and let the knees fall over to the second side. And as his pattern of problem addressing, new problem readdressing begins to expand, this new leader, this new 30% king of the jungle, finds that he is under a remarkable amount of stress, more stress than he ever imagined could be possible. And with that stress, he finds it harder and harder to get more sleep. And with less sleep, he finds the stress impacting his life more and more. And he becomes quite miserable, quite anxiety riddled. And under his leadership, his 30% of the jungle becomes quite unstable, quite dangerous. Eventually, this young lion feels like he cannot handle this anymore. He does not want this anymore. When you're right, when you're ready, let's bring our knees back to neutral. And as the knees come back to neutral, let's push down into the toe mounds and the heels and lift ourselves into a neat little bridge. This is kind of a last opportunity to check the mid-body space. When you feel like you've had enough, maybe you add a little wiggle at the top. But when you feel like you've had enough, when you feel like you're neutral, release the tailbone back down, let the eyes close, let your awareness drift within you. Ask yourself if there's anything at all your body can use, if there's anything that might be beneficial for you before Shavasana. And if there is, let's offer that. And if there's nothing else needed, let's find our way into a Shavasana, into a shape where we can appreciate Shavasana and into some stillness. And we'll just settle here into the fluidity of our breath and into the support of the mat underneath us. So it's the very last thing that this young lion wants to do, but he feels that he is at or beyond his breaking point, and he realizes he needs help. So he leaves his 30% of the jungle and he goes to talk to the old wise lion. And he walks into his den. And the old wise lion is sitting, eyes closed, meditating. He pokes him on the shoulder, and the old lion opens his eyes and says, "Ah, how are things going in your 30%?" And the young lion says, it's absolutely crazy. No one's following any of the rules I set up. I'm losing my mind. I can't believe you are sitting here in your den with your eyes closed. I'm only trying to manage 30% of the jungle. You have 70%. How is it possible you have time for this? And the old lion looks back at the young lion. Let's start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes, up into our wrists, our ankles, our elbows and our knees, shoulders and hips, neck and head. Oof. Eventually, we'll utilize the movement throughout our body to transition from the shape we are in back into a seat. And in this seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes closed. The old lion looks back at the young lion, says, if you want peace in your jungle, the young lion says, of course I do. That's all I want. The old lion says, well, if you want peace in your jungle, can you really expect it to be possible if you can't create peace in your own head? With your next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself, if you want your world to be peaceful, it needs to start within you, and see how that changes your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this evening's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Monday. Love the heck out of you. Thank you so much for making it, Annie. A 2 a.m. wake up call is that's a pretty darn early start. Love the heck out of you. I'll see you soon. Mwah.